that are in the gut, thyroid, menopause resets. They're going through their blood work, one of our other programs. And we had some really good questions come through, so I've compiled a couple of them, kept them sort of category based, and I want to dive in more so from getting back on track in January, and then there's a couple more really good ones actually from more of like an energy recovery standpoint, and some deeper mindset ones to finish as well. All right, if you've got any other questions, by all means drop them in the chat, and I can certainly come back to them as well. So I'll go through the first ones that were submitted by our members, and then any that you have to add, by all means drop them in. If any of these answers you find useful, anything else that you want to add, by all means, I'd love to know what of these you find helpful. All right, so first one I want to go through was I've had 6 to 8 weeks of socializing, travel, and disrupted routines. How do I reset without doing something extreme or stupid in January? So obviously a big part of our audience overall is usually by people that in their mid 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s even. And you're probably not looking for just another restrictive diet to feel terrible for a couple of weeks, if not months, right? You want to make sure that you're trimming a couple of kilos, getting back on track, whether that's, you're trying to lose 2 or 3 kilos or 10 plus. You're in a space where it's probably worth tightening up, enjoying summer, and not tanking energy or ruining your relationship with food in the process. All right. So the key part with where I'd start here is typically an answer that's going to be fairly consistent throughout this structure, is trying to get clear on, well, what part of your current routine has still slipped, right? If we can look back on when it felt good last, there was going to be some sort of movement, there was going to be a way that you were fueling yourself, and there was probably some sort of recovery. So we're always looking at the three. There's a fueling, there's a movement, and there's a recovery. Which one of those has slipped the most? And I'd urge you to try focus on like one of those for at least 2 to 4 weeks before trying to change everything all at once. If you've got the capacity to and you're not back at work and you want to go gung-ho, by all means, but just know yourself, because for a lot of our motivated humans that have started in January, we're probably applying the brake pedal more than we are the accelerator to make sure that it still sticks in February, March, and so on, right? So really that's a good place to start, is using that as a nice reflection of what part already has needs to be rebuilt. For a lot of our members, I've noticed that it's an 11 o'clock bedtime instead of a 9 p.m. bedtime if they're getting up early. It's a shift in what they're having with breakfast, so a bit more bread and a bit more sort of lazy breakfast options have snuck in there, or protein has dropped, or simply the exercise needs to be rebuilt back up. Now the exercise is usually the one that in Jan we see a little bit more sunlight, a little bit more motivation, and that's increased. The recipe for disaster here is when you're increasing all of that exercise, but your routines and your recovery are still terrible, right? We all know the stats that most of these New Year's resolutions are kind of done by halfway through Jan. Is because you can get through 2 weeks of more intensity, effort, and mojo, but if you're not recovering, you are burning at the candle from both ends. So I would urge towards the fueling and the recovery / just getting to bed on time being the focus, rather than getting up early and doing more workouts. That very much becomes secondary or down the line. All right. The second one, I know I need to start again, but mentally I feel flat and unmotivated. Is this discipline, burnout, or something psychological? Kind of wrap those into 3. Start again as we have gone wrong. I really liked a quote or a little sticky note that my wife had on her computer for a couple of years, which was, you don't start again, you start from experience. And I think being able to use that and highlight that focus of kind of to the first question, right, of the 6 to 8 weeks of socializing, traveling, at some point you were fueling yourself well and you felt good. So what are those things that have slipped? And use that to get yourself back on track, because the people that get stuck the most are the ones that go from keto to fasting to whatever else the new plan is, right? I've heard some crazy ones over the last couple of weeks. There's a reason that they don't stick, right? There's every short-term diet is built on a fundamental premise of restriction of calories, whether that's done by cutting out a food group, whether that's done by fasting you for a couple of days, whatever, that is fundamentally a restriction of food. If we focus on improving your sleep quality, we increase your protein and we reduce the crap in between, you are still reducing calories, but you're also focusing on those nutrients and actually fueling the body, stabilizing blood sugar, and keeping that energy controlled. So for me, I push heavily against it being disciplined. For the most people we talk to, most people are incredibly disciplined. That's usually never the issue. So maybe I'm leaning more on the psychological, but it's not something wrong with you. It's simply the recurring approach that so many of us follow, right? We talk about following a diet after diet after diet, and they all fail on us, yet we continue to follow the same approach. So really, maybe it's reflection or awareness, shifting how we start, slowing it down. Like I mentioned in the first one, start with 1 or 2 changes and make sure they're more fueling and recovery focused. So am I getting to bed on time, and am I getting enough protein in, or am I reducing the sugar, right? Do that before you think about adding in 3 more workouts or waking up early for another workout or whatever it might be. That's typically an order that's going to work best, certainly if you're in your mid 40s, 50s plus, right? We want to make you feel good in this process, not just try out discipline the year and hopefully it lasts a week longer than last time. Yeah. Cool. Next part I want to go through. Guys, if you're enjoying this, by all means, drop a like or a comment there. Which ones are resonating with you so far? The next part I want to go through is more like weight composition specific, and I think this will be quite helpful. So the first question was, I'm moving more again, but the scales haven't budged in 2 or 3 weeks. How long before that's a problem or totally normal? Yeah, good question. I think for the most part, it kind of highlights what we've talked about around recovery capacity, right? If you're pushing the body harder, it's very common that if you're still sleeping 4 hours a night or you're not fueling well, the body can really hold on to that as being more of a stress response, right? If you change everything about your life at once, your body looks at that as a stress response, goes, huh, what am I doing now, right? So being able to be more gentle with yourself around how often are you moving? Are you doing it because you feel good? Or are you noticing that you're worn out the whole time and you're trying to see how long you can hang on? If you're doing that mentally, your body's probably doing that physically as well. A plateau isn't defined as plateau is defined as being stuck for 4 weeks. So give yourself at least 4 weeks with anything before changing approach. I think the whole program hopping has caused more damage than indecision. So I think starting that would be really helpful. Again, there's lots of context there. If we dove deeper into what you've done previously, how much muscle mass you've got, where's your stress, all of that stuff is going to play a role. But honestly, if you're 2 or 3 weeks in, my question would be, if you've got more than 5 kilos to lose and your training is effective, i.e. there's some sort of muscle contraction focus, it's more than what you're currently doing, then addressing, again, the sleep recovery. Am I recovering from what I am doing? Otherwise, it's not going to be going in the right direction. And of course, the main one that most people may not consider here as well is if you are exercising more in some form of cardio fashion, so running, cycling, hiking, all of these things, all fantastic activities, but might also be something that's drastically increasing your hunger cues, right? So it could be super common for someone to increase exercise and then just eat way more. So that although it's more beneficial and we're getting fitter, you're probably noticing that you might be eating a lot more too. So provided it's not that recovery piece, which again I want to push on hard there, overall, when you do more of the aerobic cardio type activity, you're probably going to notice a lot of those hunger cues coming through more. One of the many reasons that I'd be more likely to push you towards the weight training as a first step rather than more cardio, apart from something like a daily walk. That's absolutely going to be a nice addition as well. Hope that helps. Is it better to focus on fat loss first or rebuilding muscle mass and fitness after 45? Yeah, look, anything after really 35, I'd say the focus on rebuilding muscle if you're really under muscled. So if you haven't had a strong background in sports, you don't hold a lot of muscle, if you're beyond 50, I actually think at least a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks of rebuilding muscle while fueling the body differently in regards to if you need to strip out sugars or anything that's inflaming the body is probably going to be very helpful. If you're brand new to things, that inclusion of weight training is likely going to help with fat loss anyway. So, in your first year or two of brand new to weight training, you'll likely benefit quite a lot from what's called beginner gains, and you're able to put a bit of muscle on and strip off body fat at the same time. If you've been training for 10 years plus, then of course that's a little bit harder to do, and you need to be more specific to one season or another, meaning build muscle or drop body fat. So yeah, most people are really under muscled, and I think that benefit towards weight training, if it's brand new, it's kind of going to do both, but the actual focus typically is actually muscle building. So you've grouped muscle building or muscle and fitness in the same category. I'd, in some cases, separate them because I don't want you to simply do more training, more cardio, more stuff. I want you to be specific around the contraction of tissue, rebuilding some of that metabolic rate, that muscle mass, which is going to be gold long term at keeping fat off. If anyone's dropped body fat and put it all back on, it's likely because we've focused so much on nutrition and kind of backing ourselves into that corner with calories and deficits. If we add the weight training on top and really build something that lasts, that's usually going to be a combination that really helps there. Okay. Really good question though. I really like the whole fat loss or rebuilding muscle. A lot of people don't consider it, and being able to rebuild that base that maybe is not there is a good way to start. Right, energy recovery based. What are we looking at? I want to train consistently, but my work is already full noise. How do I increase exercise without draining myself? My first recommendation, again, alongside what we've talked about with your nutrition and your, sorry, where am I at? Exercise without draining myself. Yes. We would be looking at something like a morning walk, just getting some movement in place. If your work's already full noise, there's a level of recovery that we need to manage. Now nutrition, focus on just stabilizing through that first month. If you've got all the good intentions and now work got a bit crazy, then of course building on that will be super helpful. And then of course weight training allows it to be very metabolically helpful without being like something that you can't recover from, right? So if we start with a focus on contraction of tissue, those workouts can be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, right? You can do them from home. 50% of our clients work from home or gym. So simply the addition of that can be added, but again, focus on it in phase 2 or 3. Yeah, team, this is a Q&A, so these questions were submitted beforehand. I'm just reading off the questions and then giving you an answer. If you want to drop your questions in the chat, then by all means too. I'm just going to respond to them there as well. All right. Next one, why does my recovery feel so much slower now, even though I'm not training harder? Yeah, as we get older, your window for recovery does get smaller, right? It doesn't mean that fat loss or your body composition goals are impossible. They simply mean that you can't do the random stuff that used to work before and hope it still works. One of the most common comments I get is, Ollie, I'm doing more exercise than I've ever done, or I'm being more diligent and more disciplined than I've ever been, but I'm not shifting that body fat. And for the most part, it's because in your mid-20s, just going for more runs and things and just not eating the pizza on a Saturday tend to work. And now you've got to focus on, am I hitting basic micronutrients to recover? Am I hitting enough of a protein target to rebuild that muscle tissue? Am I sleeping enough, or am I noticing that I'm just not bouncing back because I had that 6-hour sleep on Saturday, right? Being able to build on that can make a really, really big difference. So being able to start there. I'm not sure which one of the programs you're in, if you're in the gut, menopause, or one of something like thyroid or blood work, but of course there's a huge focus on that. As soon as we've put some structure in place, recovery is frankly the biggest part of it, right? So dive into that. Whatever you haven't been through, push on that harder. I wish I put a name next to this, but being able to start on that. The big part here is keep the hope, keep the focus, knowing that if we improve your recovery, we can certainly get you to a point that overall you can strip body fat, build muscle, keep your energy sharp all day, whatever it might be. All right. So getting that clear, being able to get clear on what parts are missing. Start there. 2 more. Second to last. I used to be fit, disciplined, and consistent. Now I feel like I'm starting again. How do I stop that from messing with my head? Look, I know this one really well. Being in a spot where I was rowing very regularly at a very high level, and then going through a pretty big injury and starting from scratch again, going from the 40-kilo dumbbells down to the 1 kilos and having to rebuild back from there. I know what that feels like, and I think in many ways, if you've never weight trained before, then it's going to be scary because you don't know what you're doing. You've got to go through that whole internal judgment. Hopefully you don't, but many people will, of I don't know what I'm doing, where do I start, I look silly, all of this. But if you have been fit and in shape and things in the past, not a lot of people talk about this, but I think you have to go through a lot of those same struggles, right? Like I used to be able to do so much, look how little I can do now, I've lost so much progress. Like that can be really, really tough. If you flip it on its head though, is if you think about someone who's been training for 10 or 15 years, even if you train absolutely diligently all year round, you'll get to a point that, a great year of training is like 1 kilo of muscle gained, or maybe a small fraction added to certain lifts. If you injure yourself or you're starting from scratch again, yes, you're not nearly at the point that you were at your absolute peak, but geez, you can make progress quickly, right? Because you've got that muscle memory, you've got that recovery capacity, you've usually got quite a lot of hibernating muscle that we can be rebuilt quite quickly. So again, like we talked about before, fat loss or muscle building first. In this case, if you've got a lot of muscle already, fat loss actually becomes a lot easier. You've just got to get that system back online, go through that first couple of weeks of sort of neural adaptation, contracting, stabilizing, and going from there. And you'll start to get that sense of like, oh yeah, this feels good. I remember what that felt like, and you can start building momentum. So like one of the first questions, give yourself 2 to 4 weeks of just like, this is going to suck, this is going to be way less than I used to be able to do, but man, I'm making progress quickly. And that was one of the big shifts I made through a few of my big injuries and surgeries, where it actually made training, absolutely, it was still humbling, but it made it more enjoyable. I was making progress. I was focusing on the areas that I was improving, because frankly, when you've been training for 15 years, there's not a lot of progression beyond that point. You get sort of not capped, but progress is a lot slower. There's a diminishing return. So flip it on its head, focus on how much progress you're making rather than the gap. And there's a really good book, The Gap or the Gain. If you're constantly focusing on the gap, all of this work that you have to do, it's going to be shit. If you focus on the gain and how much progress you're making and how much better you feel because of it, then I think that's a good way to look at it. So great question, dude. I hope that's very helpful with next steps, but certainly one that is not talked about a lot. If you're brand new to training, there's all of these imposter syndrome and I feel silly that you have to go through, but if you have been fit before and now you're not, there's absolutely just as much of a challenge to get back to it, but I hope to get there. Last one. What's the biggest mistake driven professionals make in January that keep them stuck in the same cycle every year? Kind of everything we talked about so far. If we're looking at this space of recovery, I think the biggest mistake is that we focus on doing more. We focus on more discipline. We focus less on recovery. All right. So the biggest one here is don't set more goals, set better standards. And I think if we set the standard of this is the time I go to bed, this is the time I work out, this is what I do to look after my body. Like you set that standard, you look at yourself, identify in a way as a athlete. And if you truly like embodied that version of like, Olly as an athlete, how would he conduct himself? I fuel a certain way, I recover a certain way, I don't just exercise and then go have a beer, right? If I made that shift, I think for the most part, I think that's most goals, most resolutions is the biggest mistake we focus on is I need more discipline, I'm going to get there this year, and I go out with a hiss and a fart with all these new things I'm doing, rather than let's get that recovery in place, let's really think about the component of I'm thinking about, even if I'm never going to be an athlete, even if that's not even part of the goal, try it on for size for a month. Olly is an athlete, how does he conduct himself? Sue is an athlete, how does he conduct himself? Ben is an athlete, how does he conduct himself? If you're able to think about, well, how would that change how I eat for breakfast? How would that change about whether I watch this Netflix show or whether I go to bed on time, right? If we focused on that, that's not a discipline thing, that's a standards thing. And if we start there, I think that makes a significant difference to really staying on track long term. So awesome question, dude. I know that's kind of, thanks for propping that up for me. That feels like a, depending on where you're in this scenario or not, but I think it's really relevant towards making sure that we can break the cycle. And if you're part of Body Reset's world, you're probably in a spot of wanting to make sure that you do this long term. This is something that's sustainable, something that makes you feel better. Your energy performance, your mental clarity, all of that stuff is in a better spot. So let's do it. Let's focus on the components that allow you to feel that way, right? Improve that recovery. The best way to wake up at 6 a.m. is not by setting an alarm, it's by going to bed early enough so you wake up at 6 a.m. ready to rumble. All right, so start there. For the most part, team, that was all of the questions that we had that came in ahead of time. Like I said, this is submitted on a monthly basis whenever you're in some of our reset programs. Hopefully that's helpful. Any other questions, by all means, in the Facebook group or on our YouTube, throw them below and I'll come back and answer a couple of those later. But otherwise, catch a replay and we'll see you again next month. See you guys. Bye.